All right, so we're continuing here our video series all about allergens and allergen introductions. So as a reminder, the big 8 allergens are peanuts, tree nuts like almonds, walnuts, pecans, pistachios, and hazelnuts, fish, shellfish, soy, dairy, wheat, and eggs. Hey everyone, editing Dr. Taylor here. Just another reminder that sesame is now the 9th big allergen, so we actually have the big 9. So in the last video, we talked a lot about peanuts and we talked a lot about the research and how the research is generally unclear on whether early introduction benefits kiddos who don't have any risk for food allergies, but we know that early introduction does not cause any harm in terms of any negative outcomes related to food allergies. And some experts suggest that early introduction may confer benefits, and we have a lot more research to do on this topic. So we talked about peanuts, and much of this in the last video, much of this peanut research is what informs the general recommendation for allergen introduction. So I'm going to share my general recommendations here for allergen introduction. But keep in mind that these are for otherwise healthy kids. If your child suffers from a medical condition that puts them at a high risk for food allergies, make sure you talk with your healthcare team about your plan for allergen introduction. So, my general allergy introduction recommendations are, again, make sure to discuss your plan with your pediatrician, your allergist, and your pediatric dietitian. Only introduce allergens to baby if they are healthy. If your baby is stuffy or congested or they're having tummy troubles, it's gonna be more difficult to distinguish if they're having an allergic reaction. You wanna give your baby the allergen at a time when you're gonna be home, not when they're in daycare, not when you're gonna be at somebody else's house, and not when you're at a restaurant. I recommend feeding baby the allergen right after they wake up so you can observe them for their entire awake window. So basically this means don't feed them and put them right down for bed or their nap. I personally feel most comfortable with the 2-hour window after allergen introduction before putting them down for nap or bed. And this is based on the general protocol for introducing peanuts to moderate risk or high risk kiddos in a doctor's office. So I take that and extrapolate it, because I think better safe than sorry here is a good approach when it comes to food allergies. So I also like to recommend trying allergens on a weekend or at a time when both parents are home rather than before school or when one parent is having to supervise baby and older siblings. Although this isn't always feasible, this helps to make sure that you can pay attention to baby and keep an eye out for reactions, and should something happen, you're able to take action quickly without having to stress about watching older siblings. Now, these recommendations, they're similar to the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease recommendations for the introduction of peanuts to infants with eczema and egg allergy, but who have tested negative for the peanut allergy, so they're deemed at a lower risk. Although some may feel that these recommendations are a little too regimented, as a mom personally and as a clinician, I like to use these guidelines of allergen introduction for my own kids and my clients. So you might be wondering, if you want to follow the early and often protocol, how much of the allergenic food should I offer and how often should I offer them? So one study by Michael Perkin and colleagues in the New England Journal of Medicine, 2 grams per week of peanut protein or egg white protein is thought to result in a lower rate of allergies. So as an example, 2 grams of peanut protein looks like 2 teaspoons of peanut butter. So obviously served in a safe way, like spread on a cracker, teething cracker, spread on some toast, or swirled into an oatmeal or a smoothie. So recommendations from the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease for children who are at a higher risk for peanut allergies but have been cleared by their doctor recommend 6 to 7 grams per month over about 3 feedings. So this again looks like approximately 2 grams per week. So making sure we're introducing those foods on a weekly basis in about 1 serving, or you could say like a fistful size for your baby. So for an infant who is not at risk for allergies and doesn't have to follow a specific plan prescribed by their doctor, attempting to serve these allergenic foods on a regular basis weekly is ideal, but not always possible here, so that's a good approach. I do recommend serving allergenic foods 3 days apart, just to prevent introducing more than one allergen at once and allowing parents to carefully observe their child. In addition, over these 3 days, I recommend serving that food 1 time each day to allow for 3 exposures before moving on from this food being considered in the introduction phase. So this allows for 2 exposures, which is in theory how many you'd need to see an allergic reaction, plus a 3rd exposure buffer just in case a prior exposure was an inadequate dose of that allergen. So as you can see here, generally my approach is a little bit more cautious when it comes to allergens, but I think having a plan in place makes myself and other parents feel a lot more comfortable with this. So now, do you need to introduce non-allergenic foods in this way? Like, what about foods that aren't in the big 8, like broccoli or bananas or sweet potatoes? Well, old recommendations say that you should serve 1 new food every 2 to 3 days, but this is just not practical. The people who made this recommendation honestly must not have been parents, because if you think about it, it would take a whole year to serve like 300 or to serve 100 foods, and you'd have to track everything and make sure like it's not a new food and you haven't served it before, or it's been 3 days, and it's just a lot. So now, since the science does not support this idea of needing to introduce non-allergenic foods 2 to 3 days apart, no one has time for that, and I don't recommend that. Those are old and outdated recommendations. So it's okay to serve 2 or more new foods at once, as long as they're not allergens. So another common question I get is, am I out of the woods once I give a food if there's no reaction? So unfortunately, no. In order for the body to launch an immune response to an ingested food, which is aka an allergic reaction, the body must be sensitized to that food. And in the case of a food allergy, the body is going to create antibodies to a food at 1 exposure, so often the 1st exposure. Although sometimes that exposure could happen through like dust in the air or contact with the skin, if the skin is broken, like in the case of eczema. And so after the 1st exposure, the body is going to develop antibodies, and then the child will develop a reaction at the 2nd exposure. So it's often the 2nd exposure to a food where someone will develop a reaction. In addition, allergies can really develop at any point, although it's more common for them to develop at a young age. I say this in the interest of transparency, not to scare you, but I also want to say that you can't live your life in constant fear of an allergy, and the best thing that you can do is to arm yourself with knowledge, which you're doing with this course, and regularly expose your kiddo to these highly allergenic foods in the big 8. So now I'm gonna end this video with some examples of how you can introduce these allergens to your baby. So let's start with peanuts. I often use Trader Joe's peanut butter Bamba puffs, which I'll get for you and I'll show you what they look like. So these peanut puffs are what I like. I like them because they're very soft and they kind of like dissolve in your baby's mouth. So anyways, so these Trader Joe's peanut butter Bamba puffs are awesome. You can use peanut butter swirled into toast, peanut butter swirled into oatmeal on smoothies, or even into infant cereal, like infant oat cereal. Now, as far as tree nuts, that sometimes can be a little bit harder. Now, I don't obviously recommend serving whole nuts to babies because they're a choking hazard. So in our house, when we do tree nut introduction, we use nut butter. So just like peanut butter, but made from walnuts. But you can also do like cashews and hazelnuts and that sort of thing. So same thing with peanut butter, spread thin on toast, nut butter swirled into oatmeal, smoothies, or baby cereal. Now, as far as fish, so grilled or baked salmon is a really great option. Super high in omega-3, great protein source, and really soft. It's a great choice for baby in general, but also when it comes to introducing fish to babies. You can also do canned sardines. They can be plain or seasoned, and you can roll them in things like flax and hemp seeds to make them a little bit less slippery. And then tilapia fish cakes can also be a great idea when it comes to introducing fish. For shellfish, sauteed or grilled shrimp, crab cakes or lobster cakes are often easy. As far as dairy goes, ghee or butter can be a great way to first introduce dairy to your baby. Now, if you want to be extra cautious and work your way up on the things that contain higher amounts of dairy protein, ghee or butter is a great first step before you move on to something like yogurt. So whole fat, unsweetened yogurt or cottage cheese with no added sodium are wonderful. Finally, shredded low sodium cheese or like soft pasteurized mozzarella are great options for baby as well. So, but remember, cow's milk should not be used as a substitute for breast milk or formula for infants under the age of 1, and cow's milk should not be given straight to infants under the age of 1. So when you're introducing dairy, make sure you do it in the form of like cheese, yogurt, or butter, not in the form of just straight milk. So wheat. This is typically one of the first allergens that I introduce because toast is a great vehicle for giving new foods to babies. So whole grain toast with butter, whole grain freezer waffle strips with smashed raspberries, or whole wheat pancakes, or wheat germ and applesauce if you're going the puree route are all really easy ways to introduce wheat to babies. When it comes to eggs, so well-cooked scrambled egg strips, hard-boiled eggs, pancakes, and crepes. Now, some children who are allergic to eggs can still tolerate eggs in baked goods. So my daughter was a great example. She was allergic to eggs. She couldn't have like scrambled eggs or hard-boiled eggs or omelets, but she tolerated things like cookies and pancakes with eggs cooked into them. So if you want to be extra cautious, you could treat the introduction of eggs in baked goods and whole eggs as separate allergen introductions. But it's not necessary unless you know for sure that your child is at a higher risk for an egg allergy. And finally, our last of the big 8 allergens is soy. So you can introduce soy to your baby using a tofu scramble. You can do tofu strips, so cutting tofu and either frying them or sauteing them in your pan. Edamame hummus can be a great option for introducing soy to your child, as well as mashed edamame beans. Hi again. So how to introduce sesame to your baby, because it is also one of the big 9 allergens. You can do sesame seeds sprinkled on pretty much anything. You can do tahini spread on toast or swirled into dishes or in sauces. And you can also look for bread products with sesame as an ingredient. So that's gonna wrap up this video. Make sure you check out those cheat sheets for tips on how to introduce allergens to your baby that you can put on the fridge if you need a reminder, and happy baby feeding.